press action against, so literally dragging them.
Knowing my parents did it to me.
Welcome back to The Vortex. I'm your host, Elle Black. Today I'm going to be talking to you about Hell Camp. I completely resonate with this. I don't know about you. Were you a good child? Did you behave? Did you make your parents really angry? I was terrible. I was constantly upsetting my parents. My poor mum was always crying, screaming. I know she was at her absolute wit's end with me, and she would have definitely sent me to one of these camps. And it does sound like hell. So at the beginning of the series, at the beginning of the documentary, it really does feel like it's actually fine. It's fine in a sort of army way, you know? I mean, tough love and all that. So concept being, children will be taken sometimes in the middle of the night by random men, and they actually think that they're being kidnapped, quite a lot of them, and suddenly find themselves in the Utah desert in this camp. They find out pretty soon, I believe, that their parents are actually the ones that would have sent them there, and spent a lot of money. There was varying amounts of money, apparently it depended on the child, etc. But we're talking between, like, I heard $10,000 and like $40,000 a pop. So not cheap at all. In fact, one of the people in the documentary says that their father probably gave over about £50,000, and the father agrees. So gosh, and that particular child definitely wasn't fixed. But the concept being that they go to this camp and they will be fixed. So they go for like 63 days, and during that time they receive heavy discipline, army style, harsh conditions. You know, it makes you grateful is the idea, isn't it? It should make you grateful. So apparently they had no beds. They were just lying on the floor, on rocks, that kind of thing. No tents. I did see tents sometimes, but I heard that in most cases often there was no tents. Maybe that was just during certain phases of the course that they were on. And that they were forced to walk really long distances, even just to get their meals. They weren't just given anything. They had to work hard for everything. I mean, life is a bit like that, isn't it? Is it just me? I do believe in discipline. So, you know, to begin with, I'm thinking, well, these children are just spoiled brats, to be honest. Especially when it starts, the very, very start, Paris Hilton is there talking about her experience in this. Not exactly the same company, however, very, very similar, and also based in Utah. So I've heard this before regarding Paris Hilton. I've seen Paris Hilton's documentary and her coming out and giving all of her personal things away recently. And this was part of it, that she was also sent to a camp like this and claims that she was abused, made to shower naked in front of men as a child, things like that. But not the same camp, like I say, but similar in that way that, you know, later on we find out that there is abuse. But to begin with, I just think, you know what, you're all just spoilt brats. You're complaining about having to work hard, walk far. Then you hear that apparently some of the hikes are like 500 miles in the hot Utah desert. There's questionability over nourishment, whether they've got access to water, clean water. Apparently they were left dirty, unable to wash for days and days and days on end or more. So it starts to go beyond a little bit. You get interviews from these other people, grown adults that were children in the 80s, 90s that this happened to. And as we go through, we hear that, you know, it really was exhausting, etc., exhausting. And in 1990, because this was happening in the 80s, a girl dies. So a 16-year-old girl on one of these intense hikes dies. And the owner of the resort, he is supposedly going to be culpable, and he goes to court and actually doesn't get found guilty. I mean, the owner himself was talking about how he wasn't physically there, he was miles away, but of course you've got to take some sort of responsibility over your staff and coordination and things like that. Now, we hear from him, and he says that he was abused as a child. In fact, he was abandoned as a child. He was given up and adopted, and then abused. I believe he was recollected by his parents after a couple of years of them having given him up before, and he talks about how his mother was a heroin addict. So they do talk about how the abused become abusers quite often. Yet I don't believe he was physically doing anything other than running the company and not doing it that well, not potentially taking care of his staff enough or coordinating with them enough. Not really sure. That just isn't clear. But the point being that he then opens up a really similar company a little while later, and that's when we hear about it getting even worse. So that's when they start to sexually abuse some of the women. And there's a few different women saying this. So they're all pretty traumatized by it, to be honest. It sounds like it would be pretty traumatizing. I mean, never mind having to walk for your food and not necessarily having the creature comforts of home. That, like I say, right at the beginning, I completely agreed with that. And actually, there was loads of children that went to this and came out better. Loads. I don't feel like it was a fair documentary for not including enough of that. And at the same time, of course, Camp Hell, it was supposed to talk about the bad bits. I feel like it could be 80%, 90%, maybe even more of the people that went to these camps, the children went to these camps, ended up being better and went home better. But this documentary really focused on the handful, and it was only a handful that were actually being interviewed in this documentary who were physically abused by some of the people working there. And when I say working there, they would promote some of the older children, some of the children that were behaving the best, to be kind of staff members. So sometimes it was them, I believe, that were doing the abuse. Certainly not the man that was owning and running the place himself. And I say the big clincher right at the end for me, right at the end, after all of this, I mean, I thought that the whole whoop was going to be about the fact that there was abuse and people died. I do believe only one person died, and I say only a couple came forward about abuse. There's a very thin line, isn't there, between strict discipline, especially when it's not coming from your parents, and taking away those creature comforts and trying to teach you a lesson. You're not going to like it. You're not going to be like, oh, this is fine. So, but yes, clearly the couple of cases towards the end about actual sexual abuse is unacceptable. But the thing is, here's the big thing. So I was going to get to that, wasn't I? The big thing. The owner, Steve Cartisano, he had 2 children himself. Yeah. And at one point, and were they perfect? Were they brilliant? Because he was going on TV and he was telling everyone, I will sort your child out and this is how I'm going to do it. They're going to come to one of my camps. They're going to be sorted out. They're going to stop doing drugs. They're going to be a good child. What was happening? And they didn't focus on this enough. Just at the end, they touch on the fact that his own 2 children, boy and girl, female, male, I think one of them, the son, did go to one of his camps at one point, and there was surprise. Why would his own son be there? But they were both on drugs. They were both having a really bad time. And I can imagine probably part of that is because he is literally going around the world saying, I can make your children better. Look at me. I can make your children better. But he was probably neglecting his own children. So they were heroin addicts. And I mean, I guess also it's going to be the up and down, the fact that they were earning loads of money, they were getting rich. Apparently he was buying Lamborghinis and things like that. And then suddenly they had none. And that's the ups and downs of when he had the camp. And then, you know, he got shut down from having to go to court and everything, and then tried to restart again. So they had that lull where they didn't have any money. The mother had to go and work in a shop, things like that. So that must have been really hard on them. But yeah, they did not have great lives. It looks like they were still in their 20s when they were being interviewed here. So unfortunately, he did contract cancer as well and died before he was ever able to help his children properly, as far as I can tell. And the really sad thing is they mention again briefly, I say they, the wife, because the husband is dead. So this is the wife of Steve Cartisano, the owner of the Hell Camp. She talks about how her children would both go to prison quite regularly, or go to jail, end up in jail for doing certain things. And she said that the son, they actually bailed out a couple of times, her and her husband, but then when her daughter ended up going, they decided therefore to not bail her out. And you could tell she was really upset and bitter and sad about that. And that is really tough love. I mean, I get completely how they were trying to teach her a lesson, but I also don't like the fact that they said because the son had been bailed out so many times, then they decided the daughter shouldn't be. I mean, if he got a few chances, surely she should. So I feel like he was somebody who was very stubborn and believed he knew exactly how to discipline people, believed it worked perfectly for him, but probably was a little bit misled. And not everything does work for everyone. Everybody is different. I would say like they said at the end as well, he was not a bad person. He just maybe was slightly misguided and didn't necessarily structure his businesses as well as he should. And I'm very sorry for the girls that were abused in that situation. No one should ever have to go through that, and I think that's awful. And the fact that he was encouraging what would have felt like abuse, taking away human rights, etc. I'm kind of not surprised that in a couple of circumstances it slipped into sexual instead of just the horrors of stopping them from sleeping by throwing water on them and things like that. So definitely some horrible sounding stuff. Me, myself, I've had a bit of tough love. I think it's technically good for you, but there's a limit. What did you think? Am I awful? Am I just coming from a terrible place, and everybody else that watches it thinks it's an absolute horror and they can't believe that anyone would ever send their children there, and they think that all parents must have regretted it, not just the one where she died, all of them, and it's definitely not a good thing, and he was an evil man? Or like me, do you think he was just a little bit misguided and actually had really good intentions, and it worked for a huge majority of the children, was a great idea, and it's just a shame that a few staff probably ruined it for the rest? I don't know. Let me know, as always, in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and please don't forget to subscribe. If you like this, you'll like the rest. We've got loads more to come. You don't want to miss it. See you soon.